This video is sponsored by Atlus. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster is available on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and PC. For this video, DidYouKnowGaming was able to interview Kazuyuki Yamai, who not only wrote the scenario for the third numbered title in the series that put the franchise on the JRPG map, Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, he also directed Nocturne and the new SMT3 Nocturne HD Remaster. These games are based on the Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei novels, and as such are full to the brim with demons. So we wanted to ask Yamai a question about the demons that we've never seen anyone else ask. What's his favorite? Yamai replied, although he doesn't make an appearance in Nocturne, my favorite demon would have to be Prometheus. I've always loved pondering about his story, how he incurred Zeus's wrath to steal fire for mankind. Are humans wielding that flame in the right way? What does right even actually mean? Several demons first introduced in Nocturne also have mythic origins. The design of Albion is based on the Cernobos giant. This is a 55-meter, 180-foot figure depicting a nude man near the village of Cernobos in Dorset, the UK. The demon's name is appropriate, as the word Albion was an ancient Gallo-Latin name for the British Isles. It derives from the ancient word for white, due to the White Cliffs of Dover being the first landmark most travelers saw coming from mainland Europe. However, Albion also references the works of 17th century English poet William Blake. In Blake's works, Albion was the name of a giant who was the son of Poseidon, Greek god of the sea. Albion founded a country on the islands of Britain and ruled there over his giant descendants until he was killed by Heracles. Giants would continue to roam the land until about 1100 years before the Roman invasion of Britain, when Brutus of Troy traveled to the Isles and defeated the giants that remained. Although several of Nocturne's demons are based on myths and legends, the demon designs in general draw inspiration from a range of sources. Everything from kaiju media like Godzilla and Ultraman, to Stephen King novels and manga like JRPG no Kitaro. Although the Kurama Tengu is obviously based on the creatures of the same name from Japanese folklore, Nocturne's demon was also influenced by film. Specifically, we're talking about a 1928 black and white silent Japanese movie titled Kurama Tengu. In the film, the protagonist assumes the role of a Kurama Tengu, explaining why Nocturne's demon looks like a man dressed as a demon, and lacks the iconic giant nose it's often depicted with in folklore. Nocturne's mannequins were also somewhat inspired by Planet of the Apes. The mannequins were designed to seem human-like, but not truly human. Just like the uncanny valley faces of the apes in the 1968 movie, the mannequins were made to represent the Vortex world, and mirrored the mechanisms of a country with a high population, acting as a mass pressuring for the birth of a new world. Even Nocturne's main protagonist, the Demi-fiend, was inspired by media. To emphasize a digital feeling, they were designed to resemble a human computer, an aesthetic inspired by the effects used in David Cronenberg's 1983 horror film, Videodrome. The character was even planned to have keyboards emanating from inside him, but this was simplified into a design with full-body tattoos. This was also intended to convey the Demi-fiend's demon powers. Not only would tattoos be an obvious physical stigma, one that's still common in Japan, but also be a nod to the real-world shamans who often had tattoos covering most of their bodies. And the decision to have a spike protruding from the Demi-fiend's neck was inspired by a theory that, when viewed sideways, a person's aura protrudes backwards like a shark fin. According to creative director Kaneko Kazuma, the spike is a type of sensory organ that represents a primitive brain being possessed by a Magatama. Magatama are special beads used in Nocturne by the player, which can change the Demi-fiend's resistances and weaknesses, and allow them to learn new skills. The inspiration for the Demi-fiend also stemmed from the American rock band Red Hot Chili Peppers. Kaneko imagined the character running around the desert naked, which is reminiscent of the Chili Peppers music video for Give It Away. The Demi-fiend was also planned to have an even more tech-inspired design early in development, but would have used an ARM-mounted comp computer like in past SMT games. But since the character had already become part demon in the story, the ability to converse with or summon demons using the comp was redundant. Despite there being no plans to continue the SMT series after the first two games, several developers proposed working on a third entry shortly after the first two titles were completed. Kazuyuki Yamai told DidYouKnowGaming that he joined Atlus in 1998, after Nocturne's development had already begun. He worked on several games during this time, such as Makken X, Makken Shao Demon Sword, and Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, and assumed Nocturne would be finished during his time on these other projects, but that wasn't the case. Nocturne's development stalled to the point where Yamai, after finishing several other projects, was brought onto Nocturne, where it it was decided the game had to be redone from scratch. The team ultimately realized they wanted to make the third SMT a next-gen experience for the PlayStation 2, which would allow them more creative and technical freedom. They briefly considered making a direct sequel to SMT2, but wanted to revisit the contemporary setting of the original title. This direction embodied Kaneko Kazuma's own view about the series being contemporary instead of archaic, and being the antithesis to mainstream fantasy works such as Lord of the Rings and Dungeons & Dragons. The team made several prototypes to get a feel for the game. This ranged from a demo featuring Cerberus to demos featuring characters from previous Megami Tensei titles. One such test used a 3D model of Lisa Silverman from Persona 2. A lot of deliberation went into how the game looked in 3D, with Yamai telling DidYouKnowGaming, Nocturne was originally designed around the goal of fully rendering the world of Shin Megami Tensei in 3D, and in a striking way that would set it apart from its predecessors, unbound by the previous game's linked narratives. As the director of the map design, I recall constantly having to ruminate on how to express the world in 3D, spending most of my time working at the office and the nearby McDonald's, and relishing the occasional days I was able to go home. The team ultimately settled on a direction, and began full development in 2002. They had a limited amount of time to redo the game, but were young and hungry to push themselves. They implemented new features like leveling up the demons and the press-turn battle system, which laid the groundwork for the newer Persona titles, and ultimately made its way into Persona 5. They also removed mechanics like weapons and armor, which they felt complicated the gameplay in past games. The game's third-person perspective was chosen to contrast the first-person perspective of the original titles, a change made to focus more on the protagonist, since the developers were putting considerable effort into the player character this time around. Another factor for the change in perspective was many reports of people suffering from a condition similar to car sickness called 3D sickness, with first-person shooters in Japan. The developers wanted players to have something to focus their eyes on, and this wasn't the only experimentation. One of the earliest ideas for the game would see giant demons using Tokyo as their battleground. Another early idea was to make the Vortex world a vast battlefield, where players could see distant scenery on the horizon and in the sky, but performance issues meant the idea had to be scrapped. Developers felt the game was more than just a third entry in the series, and that it somewhat reinvented the franchise. To emphasize the title's growth, they decided to give the game a subtitle. Before settling on Nocturne, other subtitles were considered, such as the subtitle Vortex. The final subtitle of Nocturne caused some problems for the international release. This is because there was already a game called Nocturne that had been released across North America and Europe. Nocturne was a survival horror game developed by American studio Terminal Reality and published for the PC in 1999. When Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne was being localized for North America, Atlus asked for permission to use the subtitle, and Terminal Reality agreed. In Europe, however, the game would ultimately be released as Shin Megami Tensei 3: Lucifer's Call. But this wouldn't be Nocturne's final release. In a 2018 interview about Shin Megami Tensei 5, Kazuyuki Yamai said, "We're constantly considering a port or remake of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. We're thinking we want to watch for an opportunity." And just under 2 years later, in July 2020, a remastered edition titled Shin Megami Tensei 3: Nocturne HD Remaster was announced during Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase. Seeing as Atlus has put out so many SMT games over the years, DidYouKnowGaming asked Yamai why Atlus decided to remake Nocturne specifically. He said, Atlus as a company was able to expand its audience considerably with the success of the Persona series. As a result of that, it became more common to hear younger fans of Persona 3 to 5 saying how they're interested in playing games like Nocturne but are unable to do so due to the games being unavailable on modern consoles. I always felt this was such a lost opportunity, and seeing how SMT5 is now on the horizon, I thought now would make the perfect time to revive Nocturne as well. The main philosophy the team had while making the remaster was to respect and adhere to the original game. Yamai considered it his mission to create something that wouldn't taint the memories of older fans, and also give newer fans a small taste of what playing the game felt like when it was first released. Reworking the game to run on modern consoles in 16:9 with refined graphics proved to be a challenge. Nocturne originally released on the PlayStation 2, a console that leaned heavily on opacity and particle systems, which is entirely different from how games are built on modern hardware. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster includes all the content from all 3 releases of the original game, as well as new voiceover options and an easier merciful difficulty for newcomers to the series. This means it includes all the Maniacs and Chronicle release content, like Dante from Devil May Cry and Raido Kuzunoha from Devil Summoner being recruitable guest characters. The game has a robust system for recruiting demons to your team, where players can utilize their skills and wits, or barter with items and currency. There's also an improved demon fusion system, where players can choose the demon's skills instead of it being random. If this video has sparked your interest in Nocturne, and you're interested in trying the game for yourself, you can find Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster is now available on PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. And did you also know that you've been listening to the voice behind the Demi-fiend throughout this entire video? I've been Christian Lamont. I also directed the English dub, and worked at Atlas for years before getting into VO. Thanks so much for watching, and enjoy the game.